Okay. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, depending on your time zone. Welcome to the Trade and Technology Transfer webinar. My name is Ngoc Phong van der Blai. I'm Political Affairs Officer within the BWC ISU, and I will be moderating today and tomorrow's working sessions. Before I give the floor to our distinguished guests, allow me to remind you of the meeting rules. Wenji, could you please display the rules? It's the slide. Is there any? Maybe on, yes. Thank you, Wenji. So if you are not having the floor, please have your microphones muted throughout the webinar. For speakers, whenever you have the floor, if you can put on your video, that will be much appreciated. You have many options to engage in the discussion during the webinar. So if you wish to, you can raise your hand. Then you can just simply take the floor and speak live. If you prefer, you can also send your written question via the chat channel. Please select everyone, then everyone can read it. But if you would like just to ask us some questions, or if you would like to make your comment just to the organizers, please select host. And for your information, the webinar will be recorded and the presentations will be made available online. If there are more questions and within the time limit and we are not able to address all the questions, what we will do also, we will forward the questions to the speakers, and then the answers will be also posted online. And I understand from Kimo that he will not be able to attend the Q&A session. So if there are questions that are addressed to him, then it will be forwarded to him and then put online. So I think we have now reached quite a good number of participants. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Tinmor Smith of Norway, who will officially open the webinar as well as launch our project. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Phong, and Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's great to see you all. I have the pleasure of welcoming you to this two-day webinar. The aim is twofold: to provide a space for informal discussions about Article 10 of the DWC with a view to the 9th Review Conference next year, as well as to discuss the topic of technology trade and transfer more specifically. I am grateful that you have taken the time to be with us here today, and I know that this is an extremely busy week in Geneva with lots of parallel meetings. A note of thanks also to the Implementation Support Unit for organizing today's event, and to our distinguished speakers for agreeing to contribute to our discussions today and tomorrow. The Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, BWC, is a main pillar of the global disarmament and non-proliferation regime. Next year, we commemorate 50 years since the opening for the signature of the treaty. It is not only a huge milestone, it is an occasion to double down with resolve on the implementation, universalization, and strengthening of our convention. It deserves no less. The coming 9th Review Conference is an opportunity that we must seize with both hands. Compared to the other arms control conventions, the BWC is relatively weak. It lacks both an implementing organization and a legally binding verification regime. Norway is ready to engage constructively with a view to set up such institutions under the convention. Yet, if the past is anything to go by, this will take time. In the meantime, there are numerous things we can do to make the convention work better. We should strive to avoid that political frustrations on certain parts of the agenda get in the way of making practical and useful progress where we can. The pandemic has exposed our collective vulnerability to biological risks, irrespective of their provenance. It has exposed the need for better preparedness and better response worldwide. A strengthened cooperation under Article 10 is an important part of the bulwark that we can build against future biorisks, including risks stemming from global inequities. As the WHO has warned us many times during this pandemic, we are not safe until everyone is safe. Article 10 provides for the right to participate in the fullest possible exchange of materials, equipment, and scientific and technological information for the use of biological agents and toxins for peaceful purposes. It contains a corresponding undertaking to facilitate such exchanges to the fullest extent possible. Article 10 also provides for a cooperation on the development and application on scientific discoveries in biology for the prevention of disease and other peaceful purposes. The vision of Article 10 is reflected in much of the cooperation and assistance that is already happening in the biological field worldwide. Yet many of these activities, such as the cooperative response to COVID, happen without thought or reference to the framework of the BWC. Act A and COVAX are examples in point. We must strive to make the most of Article 10. And in that regard, I think it would be useful to clarify how Article 10 relates to and how it could best supplement other systems and structures for international exchange and cooperation in the biosphere. Article 10 and its implementation has long been an area of special interest to Norway. Earlier this intersessional period, we supported 2 international workshops on cooperation and assistance under Article 10. The outcomes were presented in a working paper to BMX1 in 2018. And I would invite those interested to read this paper, which in our opinion provides useful perspectives for the continuing debate under Article 10. Encouraged by the results of our previous collaboration, Norway and the ISU decided to continue the cooperation with a new 3-year project, which is entitled Reducing Biological Risks by Promoting the Peaceful Use of Biology. Today's webinar on trade and transfer technology is in fact the launch of that project. The ISU will shortly be giving us a presentation of the various activities that we foresee in the next 3 years. It is my sincere hope that today's webinar and the one we plan for next year can provide the space for informal exchanges and creative brainstorming on how to push the envelope for Article 10 cooperation and exchange at the 9th Review Conference. I look forward to a substantive discussion today and tomorrow and wish you all a fruitful webinar. Thank you for your attention, and I pass the floor back to you, Fong. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Without further ado, let me give the floor to Mr. Daniel Feeks, Chief of the Implementation Support Unit. Daniel, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Fong. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to add my own warm welcome to everyone attending this webinar today. As Ambassador Mort-Smith said, we are all aware that several other important meetings are taking place this week here in Geneva, and the BWC Preparatory Committee will be taking place in less than 10 working days' time. So it's a busy time for all of us, so I'm grateful for you all to take the time to join us online today and tomorrow as well. Furthermore, I would like to extend my appreciation to all the distinguished speakers for agreeing to contribute to our discussions today and tomorrow. As you just heard from Ambassador Mort-Smith, today's webinar serves as a kick-off event for a new project conducted by our unit with funding from Norway on reducing biological risks by promoting the peaceful use of biology. I would therefore like to reiterate my thanks to Norway, first for its ongoing active support for Article 10 of the Convention, and second for its funding for this multi-year project. Our original plan to have a physical event on the margins of the meeting of states parties last month has been adapted to a virtual event of a more limited duration. As you may already know, limited room capacity due to renovations in the Palais des Nations, coupled with restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, made it challenging for us to run a 2-day conference as we had planned. However, we do hope that the situation will improve and that we can explore options for the planned in-person events in the future. Nevertheless, we are happy that this discussion can still take place virtually today, considering the importance of Article 10 in the context of the upcoming 9th review conference in 2022. We have often heard the view that too little concrete attention is paid to the implementation of Article 10. So we hope that today's webinar, as well as the overall project in the longer term, will contribute to addressing this. As you will see from the agenda, today's working session will feature the chair of the 2020 Meeting of Experts on Cooperation and Assistance, Mr. Kimmo Laukkanen of Finland, who will give his perspectives on the topic. Following that, my ISU colleague, Phong, will then give you a brief overview of the project on reducing biological risks by promoting the peaceful use of biology itself. And then finally, in today's session, Dr. James Revill from UNIDIR will introduce an upcoming publication by UNIDIR on possible options for Article 10 implementation, which will provide additional concrete ideas as the review conference approaches. The second session of the webinar tomorrow will focus more specifically on issues relating to trade and technology transfer. Despite the growing economic importance of the biotech sector in many developing countries and the general increasing interdependence in global trade, there has been little substantive exploration of these issues in recent BWC meetings. The session tomorrow will therefore feature several presentations focused on programs and initiatives designed to promote trade and technology transfer in the biological sciences among developing countries, as well as their contribution to the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. In that perspective, tomorrow we will welcome the participation of distinguished experts from the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, the World Academy of Sciences for the Advancement of Science in Developing Countries, and the United Nations' own Department of Economic and Social Affairs. The experts will share with us their initiatives and activities that in one way or another serve to further strengthen capacity building, promote networks, foster regional or cross-regional partnerships, and therefore contribute to supporting the objectives of Article 10 of the Convention. In conclusion, we hope that this webinar over these 2 days will provide further insights on Article 10, its provisions, its relevance, and its importance in the context of the 9th BWC Review Conference. We also hope that the webinar will stimulate discussions on topics relevant to Article 10, particularly those which have been discussed during the 2018, 19, and 2020 meetings of experts on assistance and cooperation. Looking forwards, we hope it will also contribute to fostering dialogue among states parties in advance of the 9th Review Conference next year. So I'm very much looking forward to our interactive discussions today and tomorrow, and thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Phong.
Thank you, Daniel. Now, let me turn to our next speaker, Mr. Kimmo Laukkanen of Finland, who was the chairperson of the 2020 Meeting of Experts 1 on Assistance and Cooperation, which took place this summer in August 2021. He will share with us his insights on Article 10 in the context of the 9th BWC Review Conference. Kimmo, perfect. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was
You can
muted.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
Okay,
well, and
good.
I see you very well also, Kimmo.
Okay. Thanks. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank organizers today, the Government of Norway and the Implementation Support Unit for inviting me to contribute in this informal discussion in my role as a recent chairperson of the Meeting of Experts on Cooperation and Assistance. Reflecting on the meeting that took place in August, I would like to thank you all of your support in my work as a chair. We had in-depth discussions in a constructive manner, and it was a pleasure working in the BWC MSP Bureau with my skilled colleagues as the other MX chairs, and under the able guidance of our MSP chair, Ambassador Mailu of Kenya. And I would also like to extend my appreciation to ISU for supporting our work all through. Regarding the relevance of Article 10 in the Convention, as I have said in many occasions, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has not only illustrated the great importance of health system preparedness, whether it's on national, regional, or global level, but it has also same time highlighted the need for improving the current cooperation assistance systems available. And Article 10, more than any other, promotes the principle of leaving no one behind. The experience from COVID-19 and experience from previous public health crises like Ebola also underlines the vital interface between health and security, which was also acknowledged by the 8th Review Conference of the PwC back in 2016. Moreover, allow me to reiterate that the PwC in general, especially its Article 10, contributes to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Indeed, PwC and Article 10 strongly intersect with SDG 3 on good health and well-being and SDG 16 on peace, justice and security, among others. And I am happy that further discussions on the SDGs will also take place in tomorrow's session of this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that pandemic has taught us the importance of strengthening national and global networks to rapidly identify and mitigate biological risks through enhanced collaboration. My country, Finland, attached great importance to Article 10. The 2020 Finnish government report on foreign and security policy highlights, among the other things, that the prevention of cross-border health threats requires international cooperation aimed developing the preparedness for pandemics and crisis resilience, and by supporting readiness of other countries to respond to epidemics, pandemics, and biological threats, countries effectively bolster their own safety and security. On many occasions, we have shared examples of successful cooperation assistance activities which are relevant to Article 10. Regarding Finland, we have bilateral project on biothreats with Tanzania that was actually presented in one of the MX1 informal webinars last year. Furthermore, Finland and UN Office for Disarmament Affairs are currently finalizing an agreement for a voluntary contribution from Finland to support activities of ISU in support of Article 10. And I'm also pleased to inform that with my colleagues from Philippines and Norway, we are currently starting to prepare a draft joint paper on Article 10, which will be then submitted to the 9th Review Conference, and further information will be shared at due time. Looking at my role as MX chair during last more than 18 months, it has become evident to me that any opportunity to informally exchange views and further develop ideas is welcome. And this webinar is timely and highly useful, as activities like this one should help delegates to better prepare for the upcoming 9th Review Conference. And Article 10 itself will be one of the key topics on the agenda of the review conference and improving its implementation. MX1, which was organized in August under my chairmanship, was the last one before the incoming review conference. The in-depth and substantive discussions, a large number of proposals there, indicate the clear interest of delegations to make progress on the strengthening of the strengthening cooperation and assistance under Article 10. And I hope that state parties continue to work on these proposals that were helpfully listed in the non-paper by the PwC Bureau that was submitted to the MSP as document PwC/MSP/2020/INF.2. That would help our work in finding areas of convergence. And to conclude, it is my hope that COVID-19 pandemic will motivate us to be more than ever to believe into the importance of cooperation and assistance. Hopefully, this will allow us to generate tangible result at the forthcoming 9th review conference and to accelerate the progress on the key areas of Article 10. And I very much look forward to our discussions today and tomorrow at this webinar. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Fong.
Thank you, Kimmo. As mentioned by Daniel earlier in this session, I will have the pleasure now to give a brief overview of the Norway project that we, the BWC-ISU, will be implementing. So I will ask for your patience just a few seconds. I will now share my screen. So I hope it is all fine and you are seeing the PowerPoint now and you can hear me well. Please let me know if there's any issue. First, I would like to briefly introduce the project, which is entitled Reducing Biological Risks by Promoting the Peaceful Use of Biology. It will be implemented by our team, and it is funded by Norway. So before going into the project itself, I think it would be good also to give you some background, where it came from, why it all started, what is the rationale behind this project. So in early March 2018, Norway expressed interest in contributing actively to the 2018-2020 BWC Intersessional Program, which is the current ISP, and most notably towards strengthening Article 10. And so we discussed, and therefore Norway supported 2 international workshops on Article 10, on cooperation and assistance, organized by our team, the ISU. It took place in June 2018, and then the second workshop took place in November 2018, and both took place in Geneva. The first workshop was conducted with a view to stimulate discussions in the Meeting of Experts, the Meeting of Experts 1. And the outcome of the workshop was then presented by Norway as a working paper. And here you have the links and the information, and we would encourage you to look, because there are a lot of interesting and substantive information in there. And then the second workshop built on the accomplishment of the first one. As a follow-up of these activities, sorry, just the winter cold. As the follow-up of these activities, Norway then expressed interest in further supporting cooperation, and we're starting to looking at activities, initiatives, and what possibilities could be further explored with us. And the idea of funding a multi-year project was also mentioned by Norway. Then, as requested, our team, we prepared and presented a concept note. It was in 2019. And it was compiling the proposals and the ideas that were discussed at both workshops. And it is also a mix of our own experience as ISU on the feedbacks and the comments that we have received from our state parties, especially those from developing regions, developing states parties, and those that made requests for assistance. And then based on the kind of request, the needs, and the way the requests were designed and formulated, we thought, okay, how we should shape and look into this project to address this kind of need. So then the concept paper was discussed, and it received good and positive feedback from Norway. But then, due to the pandemic, then the activities as described originally in the first concept note could no longer take place. Then consequently, we prepared and updated another concept note. And the idea was to keep the objective of the first paper, but we would still adapt to the activities and the circumstances imposed by the restrictions and by the pandemic. So here are the objectives of the project. Mainly, of course, is to strengthen the implementation of Article 10 and to help especially developing countries. The other objective is to build capacity and knowledge relating to humanitarian and developmental perspective, still within the BWC perspective. And the third objective was to strengthen developing countries' expertise and capacity to fulfill their obligation under the BWC. And here we added South-South cooperation as a very important component, because we think that it is an important component that is also linked with the principle of sustainability. When we help developing states help themselves, it's ensuring a long-term perspective rather than just helping punctually at that moment. Then the fourth objective would be to support, to promote biological safety and security and peaceful use in developing countries. And the final objective was to promote disarmament by strengthening the capacity of relevant international and multilateral organizations. Now, on the project beneficiaries, the project will provide assistance to developing countries, and as they are and yearly identified by OECD's DAC list. This list is online and we will check it. It's updated, as I said, yearly, and we will follow that list to keep things with neutral, and also we would focus then among those projects on some countries that are identified as SNT lagging countries, and those are listed by the TWAS on their website as well. And then the specific beneficiaries would be institutions and individuals within those countries then. And then the budget and the duration. So as Daniel mentioned, it will be 3 years. It will start from end 2021 to mid 2024. And the budget will be actually roughly over $110,000 US per year, which is the amount in krona, 1 million. And now on the project elements here. So there are several building human capacities, as I said, through South-South cooperation, support for the BWC cooperation and assistance database, Article 10 in the context of the 9th review conference. And this was a small administrative one that was on translation. So I will go into detail now on each of the projects and the main substantive one, the three ones that you see on screen. So the first is building human capacities through South-South cooperation. So this subproject will focus on developing human resources within the life sciences in developing countries. And we will be then partnering with some identified institutions, such as the TWAS, the World Academy of Sciences, or the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, ICGEB, which those two were the first one we approach. It doesn't mean that it's exhaustive. Maybe we will discuss with other partners, but as a preliminary, those two were identified by us. And they are already conducting training courses. And then we would be then supporting existing those, our developing state parties to participate in those existing training courses, for example. So through an application process, candidates will be selected to participate in virtual online training courses and workshops. So we are hoping these could be in person, then we would sponsor their flights, etc. But with the current situation, we adapted also that it could be virtual. And examples of topics could be biosafety, biosecurity, or advances in science and technology. As I said here, South-South cooperation is really an important component for us. The second sub-project is entitled Support for the BWC Cooperation and Assistance Database. So basically, the focus is on the Article 10 database. And as you know, it is already established and maintained by the ISU. And the database itself was already upgraded in 2018. So it's not on the work of the website itself, but we will more pay attention on the system, the substantive system surrounding the database, which means that we will then run a comprehensive study. And then we will explore other means and possibilities to promote cooperation and assistance. And we will see how we can further develop all these aspects under the framework of this database. So, for example, this could be that we could facilitate direct bilateral contacts between requesting countries and offering countries. We can also look into technical evaluation and further specification of these offers and requests and help on both sides. Also, we can also do follow-up on offering and requesting that offers and requests that we have received. So that is the second. The third is Article 10 in the context of the 9th BWC Review Conference. Basically, the webinar today is falling under this one, under this sub-project. So the idea was for us, the original plan was to have 2 one-day annual conferences on topics relevant for developing state parties, and that they will be organized on the margin or at least back-to-back with BWC annual meetings. And the conferences then will gather delegates and experts participating in those annual meetings, and somehow it will provide further training and insights to experts from developing states. Then they will be sponsored to come to the meetings themselves and then take part in those discussions. And here the objective is really to promote the relevance of Article 10 and to highlight the beneficial aspects of this Article 10. And not only focus on the risk posed by technological advances. So for us, this is really, as I said, all the beneficial aspects, and somehow it's a way also for developing state parties to see that, okay, this BWC, this convention is not only about security, but there are really beneficial aspects, there are positive aspects also, and it is really via this Article 10. And of course, this will prepare also for participation of developing state parties in the 9th Review Conference, to help them to understand the relevance of Article 10 within the whole context and the negotiations of the 9th Review Conference, for them to understand also why it is a key article, why it is so important for them to be active and take part in this. So I hope I could give a good overview of this project, and I will be happy to discuss and listen to your comments and answer your question. I will now stop my sharing my screen. Allow me just a few seconds. Wenji, I hope it is okay, that it's all fine. Let me know. And now I would like to turn to my colleague, Dr. James Revill from the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR. And his presentation is intended to provide some historical context to Article 10 discussions before laying out then options for strengthening the implementation of Article 10 and for state parties to consider. So Jamie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Fong, and indeed thank you to the ISU for organising this event and for Norway for supporting this initiative. I think discussions around Article 10 are timely. I think the topic of technology transfer and international cooperation is going to be increasingly important. Indeed, one of the lessons from history is that whilst there is a great deal of cooperation which is taking place, we are unlikely to make progress in other areas of the BWC without further progress in Article 10. Just a note in terms of this presentation, I'm speaking in my personal capacity, so the views don't necessarily reflect those of UNIDIR or the UN. And in doing so, I'm drawing from aspects of a forthcoming multi-author UNIDIR report on Article 10, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But before I get to that, if I could begin with a little bit of historical context. It seems fairly clear that Article 10 did not seem to have been given significant attention during the negotiation of the Biological Weapons Convention. But it is clear that it's become much more significant over the course of the evolution of this treaty. And I think there are a number of exogenous factors which have influenced thinking around Article 10. And the examples here include overlay with NPT thinking, peaceful purposes, wider new economic order influences, the emergence of exclusive export control regimes, and disappointment among some states with the export control provisions in the Chemical Weapons Convention, and I think influenced discussions within the BWC. It's also fairly clear that international cooperation in Article 10 was particularly important in the protocol negotiations as well. We can see that measures designed to ensure effective and full implementation of Article 10, which also avoid any restrictions, was one of 4 equally important components of the ad hoc group mandate, and it reflects the significance it was given. The ad hoc group in the protocol negotiations, as people in this room know, made some progress in the mid to late 90s, but progress did slow down over the course of the turn of the century as positions concretized and areas of strong conceptual difference emerged. I think it's fair to say that international cooperation, and more specifically technology transfer and export controls, was one of those areas where there were strong conceptual differences. Jenny Rissanen, who reported on the work of the ad hoc group extensively over the course of the protocol negotiations, went as far as to suggest that technology transfer and export controls has been a bone of contention since negotiations began. Just in terms of where we ended up in terms of the protocol negotiations, I'm going to use the composite text here as basis for discussions. This is the text which the chair, Tibor Toth, submitted as a best guess as to what a protocol could look like. It's very important when discussing this to recognise, firstly, this drew from the rolling text that states parties have been negotiating in the late 90s. But it was not a widely accepted document. Several states indicated support for composite text, but there are a diverse range of states that objected to this, arguing it was one-sided or disappointing, or alternatively further calling for the resumption of substantive negotiations on the rolling text version. The point being, what I'm about to discuss here was by no means a finished product that commanded consensus. Nonetheless, with that in mind, Article 14 of the composite text is quite interesting, and this covers scientific and technological exchange. It included a number of different components, including measures to promote science and technology and exchange, measures to avoid hampering economic and technological developments. It also included institutional mechanisms for international cooperation, including a cooperation committee that was envisaged, at least in Tibor Toth's best guess text, as being a 57-member committee to consult on, monitor and review activities fostering international cooperation and assistance, and the fullest possible exchanges of equipment, materials and scientific and technological information for peaceful purposes. It is also notable that this was separate from a point in section E, which covered the idea of a review mechanism, under which the envisaged Executive Council could review concerns raised by a state's party on the implementation of Article 10 and use this as a basis to make recommendations to a state's party concern. Again, this is not a finalised document, and as everybody knows, the negotiations ultimately collapsed in 2001, but it's just to provide some historical context. Since 2001, the importance of Article 10 has not diminished. The sixth review conference, we saw significant differences over this article. And despite the emergence of action plans for both Article 10 and Article 4, essentially these cancelled each other out in the later stages of the sixth review conference, and both were deleted. At the seventh review conference, well-known points of conflict were revisited. Proposals for an Article 10 mechanism and compliance procedure did not achieve consensus, although there was some success with a sponsorship program with the database and understanding agenda item on cooperation and assistance, which formed part of the subsequent intersection process. At the eighth review conference, there appeared to be some support at one stage for the President's proposal, and the proposal came from other states as well, for a series of open-ended working groups, which included an open-ended working group on international cooperation. But this was lost in what was frankly a minimum outcome. At the ninth review conference, this will be what states parties make of it. But I would nonetheless be surprised if Article 10 was not once again a major topic of discussion. Indeed, it could potentially be more divisive next year. As Kimo and Ambassador Mork Smith pointed out, COVID has increased attention to issues around public health and international cooperation as well. I think in some respects, the pandemic has demonstrated remarkable cases of technological cooperation and information sharing around the globe. But it has also revealed public health competition and an uneven distribution of resources, including vaccines, diagnostics, and protective equipment. You can also see in the first committee that there is renewed attention to peaceful purposes, and all of these combined suggest that Article 10 is probably going to be a significant issue, which is why trying to have informal substantive discussions is going to be important ahead of the review conference. I think this is something which we've recognised for some time, and as a means to try and engage in this discussion, we tried to put together, we have put together a paper which provides input from quite a diverse range of experts from around the world on ideas, options, thoughts for advancing Article 10. And this includes contributions from Germany, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Russian Federation, Sudan, the United States and Zimbabwe, to name a few. All of the authors are speaking in their personal capacity as well, or writing in their personal capacity. We don't claim in this report to have the answer, and Given the difficulties around Article 10, I think it's fair to say that some of the ideas will be too much for some states, others will be too little. I think it's a difficult balance to strike. But nonetheless, we hope it could stimulate some informal substantive discussions and provide some additional thinking, some new ideas and some additional thinking around existing ideas, including elements of the non-aligned movement action plan. So in terms of what we've assembled, and this is a summary of the various author contributions, some of these are fairly basic, so standardizing and analyzing Article 10 reports, and suggestions to establish a voluntary fund. There are suggestions within the contributions for a systematic review of cooperation, and tied to this, the idea of establishing a cooperation entity, call it a committee if you will. Another possibility is the application of Article 5 consultation procedures to Article 10 issues. Wider ideas about fostering a global community of scientists, including young scientists who are familiar with diplomatic and security related issues. Using Article 10 as a vehicle for education or to facilitate capacity building. Trying to develop full cycle matchmaking capacity, so building on some of the tasks which the ISU already does, but to try and extend those further. Looking at tailored regional models for cooperation, which could be considered as well. And a point which was raised earlier, this idea of trying to coordinate and connect Article 10 with wider activities, including sustainable development goals and other mechanisms as well. And then finally, one thing which underlies many of these ideas is the point that to do any of these sorts of activities, there's probably a need to remedy the institutional deficit which we currently see within the BWC. I'm not going to discuss all of these. The paper is currently in layout and design, and it should be out before the end of the year. But I will touch upon a couple of these. And I want to start with your indulgence with the idea of a cooperation entity / committee. One of the authors in the report draws on wider experiences with different regimes to identify several challenges to international cooperation and technology transfer beyond the BWC. This can include things such as the inability to identify gaps, competing national priorities, effective matchmaking, and some of the challenges that states face in trying to transform external assistance into sustainable national policies. The wider point here is that technology transfer requires not just a willingness on the part of the supplier, but effective absorptive capacity on the side of the recipient, by which I mean the necessary infrastructure and skills to be able to take advantage of technology's transfer. So there is a general point that some of the challenges with technology transfer could usefully be addressed. Richard Linane, who's the former head of the BWC Implementation Support Unit, takes this further and argues that challenges around the implementation of Article 10 could result from systemic problems. For Linane, these are less the result of government politics or policies or individual decisions around export controls, more the result of a combination of different behaviours, including some of the results from operations of export controls, but also other non-proliferation measures and various safety and security requirements. To address this, Linane proposes the establishment of a cooperation working group or a committee to better understand systemic challenges related to the implementation of Article 10 and develop recommendations to respond to such challenges. In doing so, he's very clear to argue that the mandate should make sure that the purpose of the exercise is not to examine or criticise individual national export controls, and try and look at the technical level as to what obstacles are in place and how they can be addressed more generally. So that's number one. Moving to the second one, which I'll pick on, this relates to Article 10 reports. This is not necessarily a new idea, but I think it's still useful to remind people of this and look at how we might draw out some of the latent potential of Article 10 reports. Several of our authors actually draw attention to the importance of having national Article 10 reports, which some states, clearly as the graph illustrates, not all states have submitted in recent years. I should point out on the graph here, this indicates the number of reports that have been submitted. It noted that some of these reports, I think in 2018, for example, some of the reports are submitted by multiple states. So I think in 2018, there was one by 10 states and the EU, for example. But it does give you a reflection of how many reports are actually submitted, and it's fair to say it's quite a low number. Nonetheless, if we could increase the numbers, these reports could potentially be subject to standardization and have a format or structure for them, and subject to some form of analysis. Some of our authors go a little bit further and suggest that reports should be structured to facilitate a clear understanding of the needs of states parties. One author goes further, suggesting that these could be made politically binding, and could include information on future current or planned cooperation, as well as information on export control denials. And this could be useful to help identify trends in relation to Article 10, including in the area of export control laws. Just to clarify, the authors, I don't want to attribute particular names because I haven't sought permission to do so, and I don't want to surprise some of these authors without letting them know first. I would say the paper will be out in due course, and then all these points will be attributed correctly. Another area is the issue of matchmaking. I think to some extent the ISU has already begun the process of engaging requesters and providers to try and achieve successful matches. But looking across how things work in other regimes and what has been successful, there could be scope for augmenting this with follow-up and feedback mechanisms to optimize matchmaking systems. It could also help to have someone tasked to look at international cooperation and technology transfer and look at opportunities beyond the BWC directly, for example, through the technology facilitation mechanism. Indeed, one of our authors goes further and suggests that Article 10 activities should be coordinated and connected with a much wider range of activities. This could feed into a better understanding of how biological risks are changing as a result of things like climate change or urbanization. Okay, this works. Yeah, I thought it'd be useful to point this out that the IAEA has some 2,560 professional and support staff. The OPCW says 500 on the website. I think the number is actually slightly less than that now. And then the BWC has 3 people. That's not a mistake in the graphic design. That is sort of accurate, semi-accurate reflection of the numbers. It's important to be clear that the ISU is not the same as the OPCW, and nor is the ISU an operational agency in the field of international cooperation. Yet, as several of the authors note, further activities in Article 10 are unlikely to be feasible with the current capacity of the 3-person support unit. This reflects some of the discussion that states parties have already had, and discussions around, for example, the appointment of a cooperation and assistance position within the ISU, which I think is something reflected in the non-paper submitted by the chairperson of the 2020 MSP and the 2020 MX chairs. As such, it seems very clear that if you really do want to do things, further resources will be required to try and push forward activities in relation to Article 10. And actually, there could be real value to building a more operational role for the ISU in proactively fostering cooperation and knowledge transfer, and potentially looking at what could be done and learned from some of the other practices in other regimes. And then thinking here, for example, of the Peaceful Uses of Chemistry Forum or the OPCW's Women in Chemistry initiative. These sorts of tools could be taken and brought over into the BWC, but it will require capacity. My last penultimate slide, just a couple of reflections from my side. It's fairly apparent that Article 10 is going to be a potentially quite difficult topic of debate at the 9th BWC Review Conference. I would argue the progress here on Article 10 is nonetheless going to be critical for achieving this balanced package of measures which is acceptable to all states. And I think, as Ambassador Mork-Smith indicated earlier, we have to seize this opportunity with both hands. It is a unique opportunity to chart a new strategic course for the BWC at a time when this treaty is increasingly important. Practically speaking, the 9th Review Conference is not going to be able to resolve all the challenges related to Article 10 in the space of 3 weeks. There will be several other issues that also need to be addressed, so we need to manage expectations as to what could be achieved. But this shouldn't preclude efforts to try and at least set in motion measures which could help have a serious or set up a serious and systematic process, perhaps to identify challenges or identify other routes through which Article 10 can be strengthened. And I think there is potential scope for doing that. but it does require beginning preparations, engaging in bilateral consultations and starting that now. As I say, our report will be out shortly on this. I'm happy to share it and be on our Twitter feed. We have a number of other resources. And if I just add my thanks as well to Norway for supporting our work on WMD compliance enforcement, of which the Article 10 work is also related to this as well. So thank you to our funders. And I'll leave it there, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for your comprehensive overview of the situation with Article 10 and also proposing some options. Now, let me open the Q&A session, where all participants then will have the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. I see already in the chat channel that Chris Park has made a comment. I don't know if Chris would like to take the floor. I guess not, because he didn't raise his hand, but he put down the question or the comment. Then in that case, I will read it out loud on his behalf. So Chris Park from US delegation, he said, and I believe it's addressed to you, Jamie, Dr. Reville's point about an institutional deficit, even though that's not quite how I would frame it, it is very important. If we want to do more to promote international cooperation and exchange under Article 10, state parties are going to have to be prepared to pay more for staff and activities, and potentially also for meeting time to oversee these. This is worth raising because delegations will need to come to the review conference prepared to make such commitments. Thank you, Chris, for your comment. Jamie, I don't know if you would like to react to Chris' comment.
Just to say, I would agree. One of the things that we did in the past with one of my former colleagues, Katrina McLeish, was to try and cost out some of the potential options for Article 10 and attach a price tag. I don't have that data to hand, and I think those prices would be that the actual cost they identified would be rather dated now. But I think at least looking at some of those financial costs and planning for different outcomes would be important, not just for Article 10, but more widely across the convention. I'm recognising that there will be costs if you want to do more. For me, as a BWC nerd, I think it's probably worth it for all these things, but at least having that awareness, the cost will be important. Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. I see also that Richard Guthrie raised his hand. Since you've raised your hand, I believe, Richard, you would like to make an intervention live. Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the interesting presentations today. I mean, 2 points I think I'd like to raise. I mean, I'd like to echo Christopher Park's comments. We've got a number of delegations in the BWC who have very clear instructions from their governments for only approving zero growth budgets for any international organization they deal with. Now, there are appropriate national processes that all of these countries have to go through in order to identify where there is an exception to any zero growth decision. And I think it's really very important for some of those processes to be started long before the review conference, because all of the things that are being discussed, or pretty much all of the things that have been discussed as potential outcomes for the 9th review conference, would increase expenditure within the BWC more than the rate of inflation. The second point I'd like to make, and just to try and prompt responses from anybody who's spoken this morning, during the MSP and during the MXs, we heard a number of very interesting proposals, from the Article 7 database to Science and Technology Review, a number of others. But all of these things during the review conference will have to be put together in a package of measures. You know, during a review conference, you've got many delegations arriving with a variety of perspectives, a variety of interests, and we need to bring all of those together around a package of measures that can build consensus. And most of those other proposals have a lot of detail fleshed out. The area that I think is difficult so far is Article 10. It has obviously been an area of controversy in the past, and future ideas are not as well developed. And so I think Jamie Revell's presentation on options is really very good. And so it's to make a comment to welcome this initiative from Norway and the ISU, but just to sort of prompt a thought of, Jamie, we've heard your ideas of some of these elements and just how some of these elements might be combined or interact with these other proposals that have been on the table in order to help us bring an idea around a package of measures for the 9th Review Conference. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. And I have to say that the idea of the package, I fully agree, especially that on many occasions we heard during the meeting of experts, on various meeting of experts, that there's interlinkages between the articles. So Article 10 cannot be seen alone, but it has to be seen together, for example, with Article 7 or Article 4. Then the idea of a package indeed would be something that we should keep in mind. I see now Sylvain here. I don't know if I pronounce well, I apologize. Sylvain, you have the floor.
You pronounce very well, thank you. I hope this is loud and clear for you. Hello to all, and thank you for the organizers from the French delegation. We're very happy to be here, and we fully agree on the fact that Article 10 has to offer the possibility to provide assistance to developing countries, as well as to foster dialogue on issues relating to the implementation of Article 10 and biosecurity in general. So I had this occasion, and I think you had as well during the last meeting of experts, to hear about the French project, French initiative called this project SecBio. So this is a brief occasion to remind us all and to really give you a very short snapshot of the project and remind different focus on that. So what is SecBio? SecBio is designed to be an international online platform for biosafety and biosecurity. It is an interactive tool to inform, train, and connect biosafety and biosecurity stakeholders. So there will be three main features within the SecBio project. The first pillar, it will be a searchable library for biosafety and biosecurity legal framework, treaties, laws, regulations, case law norms, standards, and best practices, as well as different scientific publications. The second pillar will be very interactive because it will be a learning module for users to build a project and to challenge their knowledge. And the last one, and not the least, it will be a forum of exchange for experts networking in order to share information, data, and best practices. So this online platform will be accessible to all state parties and international organizations, which will be able to both use the platform and to nourish it. We do really insist in this. So the use of this tool by state parties will allow the platform to become the international reference, the first one on the issue, and therefore increase the global safety and biosecurity level playing field. So we are developing the tool now, and we're very happy with that to take any of your feedbacks in order to help our project during this lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvain, and thank you to France for presenting a very compressed overview of SecBio. Thanks a lot. I don't see for the time being any hands, but I have received a question addressed to me and another question addressed to you, Jamie. I can read both of them out loud, and I'll start with yours, Jamie, then it will provide you some time to prepare. Is there something that NGOs, academia, and civil society can do to facilitate the best implementation of Article 10? And then there's a question addressed to me. What developing countries should pay special attention to while implementing Article 10 obligations. So if you allow, Jamie, I will start with my with answering, then this way it will give you some time, because I saw mine just a few minutes while the other speakers were talking. So I would say there's several aspects that developing state parties should pay special attention to. So some challenges, one aspect is need assessment. As the coordinator on Article 10, the experience I have is that sometimes we have state parties coming and very keen to implement Article 10, very keen to request assistance, but confused and not knowing where to start and where the needs are and how best to tackle, best how to even formulate the requests. So I would say this part is one challenge. The other aspect that they should keep in mind is also coordination. BWC is very multidisciplinary, and it doesn't mean that you, as the person, whoever has been sent to that specific meeting of expert or meeting of state party, will be able to deal with all the aspects. So the best is hopefully you are already nominated the national contact point. If you are not, I would advise that you should stress your government to nominate a national authority, a national contact point. Then you will have a dedicated organization entity that will be dealing with this convention that is pretty complicated. And then also then it will be easier to coordinate with all the other experts, all the other ministries, all the other agencies. And then the third consideration I would have is about once assistance has been provided, and ensure sustainability. What we heard also, one meeting, for example, I went to, I met with parliamentarians, and they explained that the problem is once we have assistance that already took place, and then assistance, for example, legislation drafting, and those legislation are adopted and drafted, but then nobody's ensuring that they're implemented, and they are just taking dust on the table. So it means really that even if the one request of assistance, one it is done and we put a tick, it doesn't mean that it is yet fully successful. Whoever you are as national contact point taking care of this aspect, you have to ensure, maybe you have to rotate, maybe you will change, to ensure that the next step, the follow-up is there, that some sustainability is also there, or to continue the communication and the cooperation with the others. So these are some aspects that just cross my mind now just on this question. Thanks a lot. And Jamie, are you ready to respond for the question I just put down? Thanks.
Yeah, if I may, could I also respond to Richard and Sylvia's point as well briefly? And Richard, on your point of costs, you're right. I think it's worth reminding people, though, that the cost of the BWC at the moment is relatively small compared to the number of international organisations. I'd even go so far as to say, if you break things down by set contributions, many of these things amount to less than $100 a year for many states. So that relativity, I think, is important, although I certainly appreciate the point on zero budget growth. I'm also tempted to, well, the balanced package is something which I think we spent quite a while thinking about, but I won't go further on that in this particular context. I'll probably go beyond my remit. On role of NGOs and things that can be done, I think there are a number of things that could be done. I think one obvious step is actually trying to have a discussion and exchange with NGOs from around the world, so we get different perspectives on Article 10 amongst a number of other topics. But it has always struck me that Article 10 is neglected in terms of scholarly work. So more interaction from the NGO community, getting technical experts, people who have expertise in cooperation and technology transfer, so not necessarily related to the BWC, kind of as the ISU is doing tomorrow, and as we've sort of sought to do it in a small way in our report, getting people who have that expertise to try and bring that to bear on BWC could also be useful as well. There's also been some discussions around possible role for NGOs and other actors in submitting providing funding support to any voluntary fund. That's one of the ideas that has been raised by our author, but I'm also conscious that past discussions along those lines have been met with resistance. Yeah, I'll stop there. Yeah, happy to follow up further.
Thanks, Jamie. I have now Chris that raised his hand, Chris Park. And Chris, you have the floor if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please.
Fong, you know me, I have comments. But just two thoughts. One was I want to thank the organizers for this event, because I think it is going to be very important that we try to explore some of these ideas and figure out the boundaries of what's possible and agreeable before the review conference. If we don't have about 80% of a solution before we get to that 3-week conference, we will not get a solution at the conference. Conferences are the culmination of a longer process. And in the BWC, for a variety of reasons, we don't tend to do as much of the work beforehand as is normally takes place. So it's very important that we take advantage of opportunities like this, and that we create additional opportunities between now and the review conference. And it'll be even more important if we wind up with a further protracted period where we don't have a chairman identified, since that's one of the roles that the chairperson would normally take on. The other point was to follow up. Yes, I know I'm talking about money again, but Jamie has rightly pointed out that the budget for the BWC is very small. And I think that's important. My government also has a very restrictive policy towards budget growth in international organizations. But the BWC is so small that any increase is going to be significant in percentage terms. There's just no getting around it. And there aren't good trade-off options. We don't have enough time for actual meetings to do the diplomatic work of sorting out our disagreements. So you can't cut the meeting time. We need more of that. We've only got 3 staff, so you can't cut there. We actually need substantially more staff. So I think there are arguments that can be made, but the key point is just that there isn't anything to cut, and the costs are quite low. But getting budget offices over that percentage increase factor can be an issue. But I think we absolutely are going to need to agree to substantial increases at this review conference if we want to achieve anything. And why am I really belaboring this point? Because at the 7th review conference, we actually had a very ambitious forward-looking package that crumbled at the last minute because a couple of delegations did not have authorization, it turned out, to agree to any increase at all. And I don't want to see that happen again. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. And talking about percentage, as the 33% of our huge unit, I can only agree with your thought on any tiny increase is still significant for the ISU. Thanks, Chris. So I don't know if Jamie would like to react on any comments from Chris. I think I reacted as the 33% of the ISU. I don't know if there's any other comments as well. I'm going through now the list just to see, and also if there's any other questions. But anyways, we are 5 minutes over time. I would just say now, if there's no more questions, I would like to thank you for your active participation, and also your comments, and all the others participants for your attention. I would say if you have more questions or comments, you can always send it to the ISU, and we will convey to the speakers. And then I would like to remind you also that tomorrow, same time, same virtual location, then there's the episode 2 session, working session 2 of this webinar, where we will dive more into a specific topic, trade and technology transfer. And with Daniel already explained and introduced, so I will not repeat. And since we are also a few minutes over time, so I'm looking forward to welcome you again tomorrow again. And then I see, okay, so this, you are welcome. These are positive and nice comments, thanking comments for all the speakers. So we are happy that you enjoyed the webinar. Yeah, so if there's no more comments and questions, then I would just like to say au revoir, then to meet you again tomorrow for the continuation of the meeting. I will then now close the session 1. And I'm looking forward, I hope you will stay and come back for session 2. Have a nice day. Jamie, thanks again for your participation, and thank you also to Chris, Richard, Sylvain, and others for their comments.